So everyone, welcome and thank you for coming to the user group. I'm one of your organizers, Dimitri, and along with me we have Bill and Dave in the back there. This meeting is being recorded. We do publish these onto YouTube, so if you don't want to be part of the recording, just don't say anything and the audio will not capture you. Always got to do the preface. So for those that weren't able to make it to our previous session, Dave did a nice presentation last month on teaching employees to the next, teaching SharePoint to the next generation of employees using mashups. The video is currently in editing and it'll be published to the YouTube channel soon. And the last 5 years plus of videos are on the YouTube channel. So definitely check that out if you'd like to cover more topics. So we're going to talk about some of the Microsoft updates from last time. And as you all know, there's hundreds of updates being pushed out every month. We try to distill it to a handful or two of the most interesting ones that we see in there that might be most relevant to our user group here. So the first is that there's a new improvement coming to the SharePoint template gallery, both for sites as well as for pages. Things are becoming a lot easier to build streamlined pages that look beautiful without having to have a creative bone in your body. The previous templates were all very rigid. The new ones actually look nice. They use some of the dynamic layouts and they make it a lot easier to just plug your content in and have something that looks good out of the bat.
I saw that today and I couldn't find where my custom templates went. Where did they go?
That's a great question. As far as I know, the custom templates should still be available as part of that.
No, I couldn't find
Yours disappeared. It's a good ticket for Microsoft.
Thanks, guys.
Moving forward, so Microsoft introduced their first-party backup service about 1.5 years ago called Microsoft 365 Backup. It's billed through your Azure in terms of your consumption billing. Previously, it was at the whole site collection level, so you would archive your whole site collection, then you would bring it back. There's a charge for the actual moving it to backup and restoring it, but the actual steady state storage cost was 1/4 of what it was to buy extra storage in active SharePoint. Microsoft is now extending that further, allowing you to do individual file or folder restores. Again, just lowering that overall total cost of ownership of managing your backups. And it's also ridiculously fast as it compares to other backup platforms, but it always raises the question of, do we want to keep our backups where we keep our actual storage, or does a third-party tool kind of, reduce your risk a little bit?
Also, they state that it's up to 24 hours. So if you archive something, you get 24 hours and then it's archived and vice versa. So it's not like you can just pop in and do it. You gotta kind of keep an eye on it and actually have an actual plan together.
The intent is very much that, we have this data that we have to keep for a long period of time. We like that it's e-discoverable in Purview. We like that we can actually go and search it through the admin interface. But we're never going to be touching content here until, we get a lawsuit down the road. So that's a great way to say, okay, we can, pay 1/4 of the cost to store it.
Is there a cost to this?
So the storage cost, like if the retail cost on active SharePoint storage is 20 cents per gigabyte per month, this is 1/4 of that. So if you've exceeded your quota based on how many storage you get as part of your base licenses and you're paying for extra storage anyways, this could be a good way to reduce that cost. In the past, we've had clients move things into like Azure Blob Storage or other lower tier storage things, but then you lose your metadata, you lose your tagging, your sensitivity labels, all of that stuff. Whereas here, it all gets retained. Moving forward, so I think this is actually a pretty neat feature that is rolling out in the next month or so. And you can now see which content in your site is being queried most frequently by AI. Meaning somebody's typing something into an agent or into Copilot Chat or into Copilot from 365, and information that's in your content in your site is being used as a source or basis for that response. So this way you can keep track of, is my site actually being used for beyond people coming to the site? But also it's a good metric where if you see that an outdated version of a file is constantly the one being referenced, it might give you a sign to, move it somewhere else or, move it into an unindexed area of your site. There's another new policy coming that I think is long overdue. And this is where you create a shareable link within your organization and you select that anybody in my org can have access to this file. Today, there's no way to say that anyone can have access to this file for 30 days, 100 days, or what have you. You can do that with anonymous links, but you can't do that with everyone in my org links. With this new feature at the tenant level, your admin can now define what that default expiration is, and ultimately will help keep shareable links a little bit more contained within the org.
That's huge.
I don't know, for those that are using Macs or support Mac users, Microsoft has revamped their whole experience for Mac OS. So this new experience is going to be a lot more consistent with Mac branding, and also my understanding is that the engine behind the scene is also revamped to work better. This is another feature that we have a few clients that are going to be very happy about, and this is that you can now have multiple phone numbers, up to 10, assigned to a single Teams user. So you might have a scenario where somebody has, different responsibilities, or in our case, we have some clients that have, multiple businesses are essentially managed by the same home office group of people between accounting and reception and so forth. So they all need to have different numbers, but instead of using call queues and different tricks to kind of route things into one place, you can now assign individual numbers to multiple people. We also have another client where a certain department actually has a different phone number for their voicemail, because they share that with the public versus the internal Teams numbers for internal and day-to-day calling. So every user actually has a second user account, and one is signed into their desk phone that's a Teams phone, one is their cell phone in Teams, and it's a complete nightmare for them to navigate this. And it was the best solution at the time of a few years ago. It seems like this will solve a few problems pretty quickly, and this will become available by the end of April to most environments. Another nice add-on is that Microsoft is expanding its Defender for O365 to also service Teams chat messages. So if somebody sends a malicious link inside of a Teams chat, whether it's within your tenant or across tenants, it'll now be filtered and roll up the same way that it would if it was an email. Another update, so Microsoft continues to improve the different models that are behind Copilot. Just curious, quick show of hands, who's enabled Anthropic as a subprocessor within their tenant? If you haven't yet, I'd recommend checking it out. Microsoft's entire model of Copilot is that Copilot is this abstraction layer that can have one or more models behind the scenes. So with this update in particular, they're taking the GPT model behind the scenes and upgrading it to the latest version of GPT, which is 5.2, which improves better reasoning. And I feel like it's a cat and mouse game that one day Anthropic's doing better, one day OpenAI is doing better, one day Gemini is doing better. And I think we all benefit out of it because it's a nice competitive race to, who could get to general AI fastest. So another nice addition to Copilot is that you can now reference a SharePoint list in terms of the data that you want to reason over. So previously you can access files, you can point to SharePoint sites as a whole, although SharePoint list items were not included as part of that response. Now, if you're using SharePoint lists for inventory management or your typical calendar use cases, you can now have that be a source of grounding data when you ask Copilot questions. Microsoft is also improving the designer tools within Copilot, specifically where you're asking Copilot to create photos or videos. And now you can have a lot more visual insights. So instead of having to write really sophisticated prompts, you can now say, make this more formal, make it more casual and whatnot, just to make it a little bit easier to say, I want a picture, of a cat on a keyboard pushing buttons. So thanks to the company I work for, Turn Digital, for giving us the space and the food. And that being said, we're going to pass the mic to our main event. We have Jared presenting on Ignite in Action. So Jared, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Dimitri, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time this evening to come out and break a little bread, a little bit of pizza. Apologies, I really had intended on being there. I just ran into some interesting travel this week, and I'm really very appreciative of just the fact that we have technology to help link us all together. So this is a new topic for me. This is my second time going through it. I made a couple of tweaks here and there. Very open to feedback. Certainly, if you have any questions, and yeah, really looking forward to presenting this. So, quick agenda. I'll do a quick introduction about who I am, and I'll spend just a little bit of time talking about the why behind this topic. What kind of inspired me to start putting together this content. One of the main elements of this is FOMO, fear of missing out, and I want to just touch on that a little bit because I feel like given everything that's happening right now with this rush to go do something with AI, there's a lot of misconceptions around sort of where we actually are. and sort of where the marketing is saying things are, and where I don't know. I think there's a lot of FOMO happening right now, when actually I think the reality is not everyone is as sort of far along in their AI journey as maybe marketing depicts it is. And then kind of in concert with that, I've been working on a book, and my background comes from consulting, so I started working on this framework, and it's really meant for if you're feeling a lot of the pressure to go do something, whether it be with Copilot, with agents, with third-party AI, how do you introduce this to your organization in a way where you're able to, get spend your dollars wisely, fail fast, collect feedback, and then iterate in a way where you're driving momentum forward and you're not just overwhelmed by all the various choices that are out there and potential AI solutions. And then I'll wrap up a little bit of next steps, and I'll do my best to make sure you all get the slides after the fact. So as a really quick intro, I've been there. I presented it for you all a couple times now, but in case my face is new to you, so my name is Jared Mathis. I'm a solutions architect at a company called AvePoint. We're a Microsoft partner. We're basically a data protection company. We've got a SaaS-based platform that helps to do everything from migration to backup to archive to extending some of the capabilities of Microsoft Purview. I was recently re-awarded Microsoft MVP last year, and one of the reasons why is I really enjoy learning and then sharing what I've learned with others, and hopefully that either inspires you to go learn more yourself, or I don't know, helps you with some of the work needed to get your job done. I also I've written a couple books, so if you enjoy reading, or if you enjoy having books on your bookshelf behind you and for meetings and looking like you're super smart, those are a couple of books that they've already been published by Wiley. One's on M365 Copilot, and it's really, my chapters are about projectizing it, collecting feedback, measuring ROI, and all that. And then I wrote a second book on Copilot Studio and how to start building out agents. And I'm kind of excited. I've got a third book coming out in May that's you're going to get like a sneak peek at some of the content, and then really this framework is highlighted in that book. So again, just a quick little plug for that. And when I'm not talking about Copilot and AI, and I'm not writing books about Copilot and AI, my wife and I love to travel, and then we board our little dogs. We got two Frenchies. One is fast asleep behind me. So that's just a little bit about me. Happy to connect. Happy to connect after the meeting. So thank you so much for the opportunity. So the why. What's this topic about? Why am I talking about FOMO? Why am I talking about frameworks? And what happened was I was presenting last year at the Power Platform Community Conference, in Vegas. And one of the things that I mentioned during my talk was it's okay if you're really just getting started with AI. It's okay if you don't have hundreds of thousands of Copilot licenses. It's okay if you don't have thousands of agents that are automating all these processes. I think the reality is this technology is still very new. We're still learning from it. And I don't want to discourage any sort of experimentation work, but I think we're still in that stage where there's a lot of storming that's happening. And I really love what Dimitri he was talking about earlier, where these different AI providers are all racing for like the next model and the next capability, and there's part of us that are getting to benefit from those that research and that investment, but there's also part of us that's also doing the quality assurance work that they should be doing themselves. We're trying out these models, we're collecting feedback, we're providing it back to those different AI providers. And so I think, when I hear about things like, the E7 license being $100 per user per month, or Copilot being $30 per user per month, I think it's okay to question that, push back a little bit, and not feel like you have to make these, significant investments just yet, because I think we really still are in a stage where for some use cases, it's still very much emerging and experimenting. And when I mentioned that, I had a couple folks come up to me afterwards, and their feedback was, I really appreciate you just even saying that. The the feedback was, when they meet with their Microsoft account teams or, their executives go to conferences, they come back and there's this feeling like we're missing out because we're not all the way transformed with AI. We're not spending millions of dollars. We're not seeing, hundreds of thousands of hours of productivity gains and all that. And I think that's okay. I mean, do I think long term we're going to see sort of what's been promised to us? Yes, I really do. I just don't think we're all the way there just yet. And I think what compounds some of this too is honestly Microsoft. And while I love the fact that Microsoft has been helping me pay my mortgage indirectly for a couple decades now, when you look at all the various, sort of co-pilots and services with AI integrated, it just kind of becomes a mess, right? You've got M365 Copilot. They're introducing, Copilot into whatever Viva is left after they keep on deprecating the different services. You've got Copilots in Azure. You've got security Copilots. They put, Copilot in Microsoft Paint. It's just kind of wild, like how much they're trying to just sort of shove Copilot into everything. Copilot Studio is Power Virtual Agents. It's had now two different logos to it. There's a Copilot to help you build agents. Like there's just a lot going on, and I think the reality is, the focus needs to be, you have business problems. What's the right technology to solve these business problems? It's not always AI, right? There's a lot of business processes that can be solved with just, business process automation software, forms, workflows, RPA. Those are tried and true capabilities. And I'm not trying to sound negative about AI. I'm actually really an enthusiast. I do think there's a ton of value, but I think it needs to be tempered with the right expectations and the right use cases. And you need to be careful around, buying into the hype too much. I think, one of the things that I've written about and I truly believe is that the way to unlock value with AI is through targeted experiments and learning from those experiments and figuring out, do you continue to make the investment or do you fail fast and move and pivot to something else? And so when I talk about just sort of, the pressure that a lot of us are maybe feeling, and actually I'll pause real quick. Is anyone else feeling that? Does anyone else kind of feel that pressure of like you're behind or you need to catch up or the Microsoft is saying to do all these things, but you're not quite ready yet? Like I see a couple head nods. It feels like, yeah, is that kind of a common feel some hands? It's a lot, right? It's kind of a lot of pressure. And when you feel that pressure, right? You feel that pressure of you're behind or you need to catch up. It's FOMO, right? It's fear of missing out. And I took this picture of me and a couple folks. I was at Microsoft Ignite, right? I was working at the booth. And if you look at a picture like this, right, you see me smiling. I've got Daniel Glenn, who's another really great Microsoft MVP based out of Nashville. I got Stephanie, one of my sellers out of Chicago. Caesar, I've known for 15 years. We're all kind of smiling and having fun at the booth. And, if you weren't at Microsoft Ignite, you'd probably be feeling like, man, like I'm kind of missing out. Like, I'm looking, that looks like fun. I bet you there's a lot of cool lessons to be learned, a lot of great conversations, a lot of good things. And so you start to tell yourself that story by looking at that picture. Now, what if I told you that my Ignite experience, despite the fact there's that photo, I spent 12 to 13 hours each day on my feet at the booth, like just constantly answering questions. Didn't get to go to any sessions, didn't go to really to do much walking around. I just worked my butt off for that entire week at Ignite. It's kind of a different sort of view that you don't get from looking at a picture like that, right? And so I think a lot of the pressures that we're feeling is very similar to that, right? You're getting these snippets. You're getting these use cases or case studies that are coming from, all the various tech communities saying, wow, look at, X company has been able to triple revenues or double revenues or cut X processes down in time. Like, man, like if we don't do that soon, we're going to be out of business. And I think that some of that right now is very intentional. I think the push for AI is being driven because it's the next gold rush. Every single software provider is trying to make a buck on this thing. And they're trying to build this sort of like this movement of, gosh, if you're not there yet, you are so falling behind. And, what I see, how that kind of shows up in the enterprise is like, yeah, you're feeling pressure. Either you're feeling the pressure, leaders are making you feel that pressure. And then what happens when you're feeling that pressure is you feel like you have to like move quickly. And sometimes when you move quickly, you don't move with purpose and strategically. So maybe you start spinning up a bunch of these different pilots. Like, oh, we're gonna go try out Copilot, we're gonna try out Gemini, we're gonna try out Claude, and we're gonna try out, Google Workspaces, and we're gonna try out all these different things. And then you start buying kind of duplicative capability. You've got all these pilots that are spinning up, and people are, quote unquote, like kicking the tires, but there's no structure to it. And a lot of times I see all these pilots, there's no really great way of measurement. And even worse, I see a lot of these pilots being run by IT. Now, I spent, 11 years in a back office IT role. And I'm gonna tell you that IT is the worst people to run pilots. We are so used to dealing with nonsense and workarounds that we are not the best testers of this technology. Give me a curmudgeon person from the business that hates technology. That's my best pilot tester, right? Help me find all the gaps in this thing. Help me find out how something doesn't work. And before you spend the money, make sure that you have success criteria defined. So when you're kicking these quote unquote tires, you know what you're trying to prove out. Are you trying to prove this thing is successful? Are you trying to prove it's not like it's not going to work, or are you going with biases? Like, I think it's super important before you jump into this to really think through like what this pilot's going to be. And the cost of this distraction. I thought this was a cute little. I like throwing a little bit of AI slop into my presentations because I think it livens things up just a little bit. It's like one of my favorite memes. But the cost of this distraction, right, is kind of shallow versus deep work. So when you talk about doing, when you're getting that pressure of missing out, you start doing these little pilots, and you're really maybe not, you're kind of scratching the surface. You're not really going into the depths of what this thing can do. So you're really just, does Copilot work? Yeah, it kind of works. Right, if I ask it stuff, it finds some documents. Does it find the right documents? Well, maybe, but like I don't know. Is it really a Copilot thing? Is it a data thing? I don't really know. Like these surface level use case, that's not proving out real value, right? And so I'm just a proponent of like make sure you're going deep on these pilots to really prove this stuff out before you make any sort of significant investment. The second big cost is this decision fatigue, right? So you're evaluating all these different things, and some of them are very similar, right? When you talk about testing out, maybe Claude versus, GPT-5.4, like they're not that totally different. And as you're trying to evaluate differences, it's the how much of a nuance is really helpful to you. And when you're starting to try to it takes away from some of your strategic thinking and the strategic decision making by taking on too many of these pilots. And then in addition to just some of that decision fatigue, you also have some of that operational drag, right? You've got all these projects spinning up. You've only got a finite number of resources that can help you support that, right? Any one of these AI initiatives, typically you're having to involve more than just you as like the sort of quote the pilot person. Like maybe you're pulling in your security team, maybe you got to pull in compliance, maybe there's some infrastructure operations groups. And so as you have more and more of these pilots that are not really all that deep, are you really getting the most value out of the finite resources that you have? And then really tends to, I've seen this before where you kind of got like you're sort of slowing everybody down by having too many of these things running at the same time. And finally, just to call it like, again, this stuff is not cheap, right? I was kind of joking. The Copilot license is what, $30 per user per month. You go get, a Claude. I think that's what it's 6 months is like $200, like depending on what kind of discounts you negotiate. So you start buying all these things. If you're someone that has multiple tools now, and you're not using them all at the same time, you're training people on these different tools. You're maybe not measuring getting the true sort of ROI out of it. So like by having like all this distraction and not getting super organized, you're really just slowing yourself down. You're bogging down your coworkers. You're bogging down the overall organization, and you're spending a lot of money to not be able to prove it. Now, for me, when I've been in the IT space now 20 something years. I got into IT to solve business problems. Like that has been the thing that's really sort of motivated me for the past 20 plus years. I love seeing people take work or take challenges and having technology solve those challenges. It's kind of getting to play with the new and shiny. Yeah, at times that's a bit of a perk, but the reality is for our purpose, again, assuming that you're in some sort of a, technology IT role, it's really about how are you enabling your business to be more productive, more effective, to drive the quality of what they all produce so that you can benefit from that as an employee of that organization, right? So again, I'm not trying to like be negative, I'm just saying like, hey, like be aware that like these, without going in with a plan, without having some strategy, it can kind of create additional chaos on top of the already chaotic lives that we're living in like right now. So I've talked a lot about sort of the problems, some of the FOMO, some of the areas of friction. Again, I'm kind of a little bit of an academic to some degree. I love reading, I love researching, I love, learning from working with different customers, in my role, getting feedback. One of my favorite stories that I like to tell is I helped lead early access preview for Microsoft 365 Copilot, my old job. So I was one you can buy like 300 licenses, and it was really for, again, for us to kind of QA Microsoft's solution, give them some feedback. And I was working with one of our customers, and I was kind of relaying some of my lessons learned to him. And he was he's an executive vice president at a major financial services firm, and they had made a strategic investment in M365 Copilot. They bought 25,000 licenses, and they were looking to light that up right before Christmas a couple years back. And he asked me, he goes, "Hey, what do you think about that?" I go, "Don't do it." I go, "Don't do it." I go, "You're crazy." he goes, he's laughing. He goes, why do you say that? I go, I go, "Deepak, I go, this is one of these things where as much as this is a technology project, this is really an adoption change management project. This is all about creating that really positive first impression. It's about aiming and it's about arming your business users with use cases. It's helping them understand the gotchas, and it's helping ensure that this is not a one and done where they try something out, it doesn't work, and then they end up having to pivot, or they say, hey, this thing's garbage. I don't want to do this anymore. This is not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze." And what do you think they did? They rolled it out anyway, right? They ignored. Who am I? Like just a guy. But it's funny. I came back to him 6 months later. We were talking about sort of the next area of sprawl, which is agents. And I was chatting with Deepak. I was like, "Hey, so how's it going?" He goes, "You know what?" He goes, "I have to laugh." He goes, "Of all the people I surround myself with, every single person I asked, should we go ahead and light these up? Everybody said yes. Microsoft said yes. All of our trusted partners said yes." He goes, "You're the only person who said no." And he goes, "If I had to do it again," he goes, "based on the amount of feedback and help desk tickets, I definitely would have taken your advice, and we would have waved this sucker out. We would have taken a more, sort of thoughtful approach to our rollout." And obviously, I hate to hear that was experienced, but it felt a little bit validating that he felt some of the pain by getting that pressure to move fast. His help desk wasn't ready for the onslaught of questions. They didn't have clear messaging around when to use what, and the differences of Copilot in Word versus PowerPoint versus Excel versus chat. So talking about some of the limitations about what it could do. And he said, "I really would have been better had we started out with a more better, just a better rollout plan, better expectation setting for what this technology can do." And so for me, I learned from that too, right? I learned from like, hey, A, I was right, but also there are things that I could think about. So as I'm thinking about, sort of that situation, and I'm thinking through just other customers that I've worked with, I put together this framework. And like, so again, my background is I spent 11 years out in aerospace. I spent another 10 years in consulting. So if you ever had to work with consultants, I apologize because it can be a little bit difficult. But when we're doing good work, we typically like frameworks, because what I say about frameworks is it makes things very repeatable, right? If you're trying to help, different types of organizations, different verticals, you've got a sort of lessons learned that you can go apply and scale up. So here's my framework that I've been noodling on, and I thought it's kind of cute to call it Ignite because I'm kind of a Microsoft fanboy at heart, and the beginning of Ignite, it's an acronym, right? So it all starts with Inspire, and it's really, and I'm going to drill into these in subsequent slides, but Inspire is really about helping people understand the art of the possible, and to sort of build up that hype train a little bit. And the next is Gauge, and Gauge is about gauging your readiness to make sure that you're picking an area that's ready for this particular experiment or experiments. The next thing is about nailing pilots, ensuring you've thought through what is that success criteria going to be, so you can collect that feedback. You can help communicate that upwards to your senior leadership and your stakeholders to be able to then further drive additional transformation. The next is about iterating, and I think it's very important to understand that, this technology is really about piloting and experimentation. It's about learning. It's about making modifications based on your users' feedback and iterating or failing fast if the technology is not the best fit for that particular use case. After you're iterating, you need to be able to track that impact. Are we actually seeing and proving out our hypothesis, or are we not? And then finally, after, it's all about embedding governance. And I like, governance is one of those things where you kind of bang that drum, but I think given the nature of the uncertainty around AI and what the outputs might be, it's really important to ensure that not only do you have appropriate technology controls in place, but you start to build out a culture of governance. As new initiatives or new pilots are scaffolding up, they don't look at engaging with legal or with compliance as a burden, but it's a critical step to ensuring that they've thought through any of the long-term ramifications of this particular pilot before you go and bring it in front of users. I think the worst thing that could happen with AI is the fact that if you start to put it out there too soon without the appropriate guardrails and appropriate governance in place, it has a negative impact, a negative connotation, or negative impact to your organization, right? When we've seen some spots of that, right? Some of the early days of some of the experiments, right? When Air Canada launched an AI-powered chatbot and it was giving bad information about a ticket processes, and ultimately that case went to court. And Air Canada was found liable because, it was a quote unquote an official source of information. So really ensuring that you've thought through governance before, scaling too quickly and incorporating that into your experimentation process will help you avoid any of those scenarios that could have negative repercussions. So I'm going to start stepping through sort of the key aspects of this framework. And again, I'm hoping it's helpful. Hopefully it inspires you a little bit. And inspire is about starting with the why. It's really important to understand that while maybe some of us live in this tech bubble where, we're experimenting with, ChatGPT in our personal life, and we got Copilot in our professional life, or we're listening to Dimitri, we're turning on Anthropic so we can get access to Claude, or, maybe we've got, Gemini, or we're tinkering with Perplexity. I think, the fact that we're technologists at heart, we are going to experiment. We are going to play with a lot of these things. We're going to be reading the news articles. We're going to following up from the influencers on LinkedIn. We're going to go attend events like this, right? User groups where we're trying to learn more. But I think it's super important to recognize that we are the exception and not the norm. My wife is a nurse, right? She works with, she's a geriatric nurse. She works at assisted living facilities. She just tried out ChatGPT this January. Just did. And I know we've all seen that chart about how quickly ChatGPT has been adopted by, millions and millions of people. But there are millions and millions more that have never touched it, that have no idea what it is. And I think it's super important as we're embarking on this that we recognize that not everybody is following all the latest updates. They don't know the drama with Sam Altman. They don't know what's going on with the Department of Defense and classifying Anthropic as a risk. Like they don't know. They don't follow that type of stuff. We do. So when you're starting out, it is really about helping to explain what it is, what it isn't, and it's also about helping to share a little bit around art of the possible. Help people start to understand, using a little bit of storytelling around what this capability could do. And for example, you might want to share, like, hey, you as like an HR employee, maybe you're spending up to 10 hours a week answering all sorts of different questions that are coming in from a shared mailbox. Like maybe it's around PTO or when's benefits and open enrollment and what's the current coverages, or I have to go take a leave of absence, right? You should maybe talk about how like there's that sort of lower value work that's out there. That you're spending a lot of time sort of repeating yourself and very procedural. And then talk about how, well, maybe the new way of working is this HR agent that can assist with maybe not all questions, but maybe 80% of those kind of common questions. And that agent is available off hours. So, if you're working your typical kind of 8 to 5, 8 to 6 sort of day, when if you're working with different time zones and you come back in the next morning, maybe you're not met with a full mailbox of questions because some of your folks that are working different time zones are able to engage with that agent at the time that makes most sense to them. And this, sort of art of the possible is hopefully a way that you can, sort of serve as a catalyst to get people a little bit excited about what's, potentially possible. But I do also think, as much as it's important to share the art of the possible, I also think it's important to recognize that AI isn't, just like a product. While it's definitely being, integrated into products, to be able to actually leverage it in your flow of work is a form of transformation. And I like to say that you don't go from I've never touched AI or I've never worked with Copilot, I've never worked with ChatGPT to now I'm, Tom Cruise in Minority Report and like moving all these things around and solving these problems, being super. No, like it is like that. It's like that infomercial where the guy's carrying the bucket and he ends up dropping and spilling water all over himself. Like that's actually kind of how, like, from what I've seen, especially if you're not super tech savvy. So I think it's also important to set that expectation with your users that typically with certain types of AI implementations, there's actually a productivity decrease in the beginning. I don't really know if we talk about that a lot, but there's a lot of sort of that early on experimentation. Like when I first got Copilot, I wasted so many hours trying to get to do stuff I can't do. And I don't want to say that that should be the right expectation, but I do think it's important to say like, hey, there is going to be some trial and error. And for some people, for some personas, for some people that aren't highly adaptable or don't really love that experimentation piece, like that might be difficult. So I do think it's very important to bring that to the forefront so it doesn't catch anyone by surprise, and that there is that sort of expectation of there will be some bit of productivity drop in the beginning as they're starting to learn how to prompt and how to get the most value out of this technology. Once you've set the foundation and you aspire, the next is really around gauging readiness. So really understanding what risk you might have and begin to set the expectation. And for me, like I think it's funny, like, and I like the fact that a lot of companies I talk to, they are going with sort of the less risky use cases to start. A lot of times companies I'm talking to, very first thing we're doing, hey, we're doing Copilot chat. We know that all the prompts and responses are covered under our Microsoft Data Protection Agreement. It's very limited in terms of the files they'll have access to. That feels like a really like low risk way to start. And like I love that, right? And understanding your risk and understanding some of the gotchas is super important before you scale up to the entire enterprise. And the reason behind that is, a lot of these projects fail. And they don't, it's not going to say fail, maybe they don't really move past that initial pilot stage. And the reasons behind that, as you can see, like on the screen, right, there's data quality concerns, especially when we talk about, anything that's using the retrieval augmented generation pattern, the RAG pattern, which is your typical, Microsoft 365 Copilot type of implementation. If you're prompting Copilot for, what's our benefits this year, right? And if it returns the 2023 PDF document, that's not so great, right? I think you as someone in IT understands that, well, yeah, like, it doesn't really know the context, and maybe that file was accessed the most, or it's sort of driven by that. But your average user is going to go, well, I thought this AI thing's supposed to be super smart. Like, why is it giving me old information? Like, that's not great. Or if I've had this before too, where some customers have turned on Copilot and they start asking questions and they start going, man, I'm getting and seeing files I should not have access to. I just found someone's, W-2. I found someone's comp statement. I found out that we're going to be closing a plant, but actually, no, we're not closing a plant. We closed it 10 years ago, but I don't even know I have access to that file. And then additionally, it's not even just the permissions and the oversharing, but it's, any sort of regulatory requirements and ensuring that you're not creating situations where you're introducing violations of any regulatory requirements. And then additionally too, like just again, I feel like I don't want to be like a broken record, but because I've yet to see anyone tell me that their IT budgets are growing significantly, it's really important to ensure that you're coming up and able to demonstrate, some sort of an ROI from this implementation, right? Again, we're not building or deploying technology just because it's shiny and fun, but we're doing so because it's going to help transform and drive a true return, whether it's productivity gains, or quality gains, or helping you to build new service offerings or respond to meet different customers that you couldn't meet before. It's critically important to have that and be able to do that for these investments. And readiness, while it can be kind of, from a consulting perspective, it is a bit of a checklist. It really is something you're going to need to start doing as part of your day to day and really kind of building that culture of experimentation and learning and growing. So the first step really is around people readiness. And it's important to know that as you're gauging where to experiment, you have to recognize that not everybody's going to be the most adaptable. And if you also have to figure out where are the people that maybe perhaps are not going to trust this or might sort of be apprehensive about this, because I think it's important if you are going to do if you're in that early stage, you are doing initial experiments, ideally you want those to hopefully be semi-successful. And so you're going to make sure that the people or the area that you're focused on have the time and attention to be able to go through that learning and that experimentation and to be prepared for that initial productivity gain. And additionally, we have to start thinking through process readiness. So, you think about like where are we going to start? How do we go ahead and decide that? Or if we have, a pull from the business, what does that intake look like? I'm seeing more and more sort of pressure coming from different areas of the business. We have to catch up. We have to do AI. We've got these ideas. Oh, this vendor's doing this. And in some instances we have IT that's driving, but I am seeing more of a shift of business pushing these requirements. So you have to start thinking through what does that intake look like so you can start to prioritize where you might want to experiment and where you might want to make those investments. The other big thing too is around data, right? Data is king right now. And so when you think about, your use case, ensuring that the data that you're going to be leveraging as part of that use case is ready for that, making sure that you don't have older content, that you don't have over permission, oversharing, and that there are clear owners. And remember too, like again, these experiments, they can move quickly, but they can also linger for a while. So let's say, for example, you say, hey, we're going to go do an agent that's going to help answer, travel related questions, right? What kind of class can I book? How do I need a corporate card? All those things. Don't forget too, while you might be grounding on an approved document library in SharePoint, there are still people that are going to be doing things in that document library. So ensuring that there's people that are owners of that are aware that you now not only have people navigating perhaps a SharePoint site to see those files, but now you have AI that's going to that as well to make sure that they're aware and prepared. And if there are instances maybe where they're deprecating content, they might actually take it out of that library, either archive it or delete it. So again, AI or the agent is not returning those older files. And then finally, it's really about platform readiness. So ensuring that you have those governance guardrails in place to be able to support that use case, whether it be purview sensitivity labels for some of your more sensitive content, or ensuring that you run some sort of lifecycle management across those sites or teams. Super important to make sure that, or just ensuring that you have reporting in place to be able to monitor the prompts and the responses that are coming back. So again, this is kind of what should hopefully be helpful as you start to gauge where it might make sense to do some initial experimentation. And to help gauge that, sorry, I'm going to build that slide up. I have just, again, as a sample, maybe it's a starting point for you to start to, assess or sort of self-assess, how ready you are across these dimensions. So you'll start to score kind of 1 to 5, from a people perspective. Will your teams understand what AI can do, what can it do? Do they feel psychologically safe to be able to ask questions, about either that use case or about AI technology as a whole? And are there owners and champions identified to help you drive that use case? From a process perspective, have you defined what intake looks like for these great ideas that are coming from your business? And are there people in legal and risk and compliance that know what their role is in helping to evaluate those use cases? And is there a way to start to score out the success criteria so that if you're going to be piloting this, you know what you're measuring against? From a platform's perspective, have you been able to address oversharing if it's unstructured data? If it's structured data, is there data lifecycle management around that? Like if you're going to go build a agent that's going to talk to CRM, do you have good data hygiene in your CRM? If you are talking unstructured data, do you have rot, redundant, obsolete, and trivial data? Has that been pushed out of your tenant? And do you feel like you have the right data to support the right answers for what the users are going to try to do? And then finally, from a data perspective, is everything following a clear life cycle? Are there guardrails for access to that data, to connectors, deployment? And do you know how to monitor and roll back should anything negative happen? So again, just kind of give me some initial thoughts around some questions, some self-assessment. And then what you can do to sort of, if you were to score it all up, is, depending on where you fall, maybe 16, 20, yeah, you're ready to kind of scale forward, move forward. Maybe if you're in like the 10 to 15 range, you might want to do a little bit more homework, a little bit remediation. And if you're below 10, maybe there's a lot more work that has to be done before you're ready to take on that particular pilot use case. And when you do that self-assessment, you should be asking yourself, where did you score the lowest, and what might be some steps that you can take to go ahead and grow and improve upon that. So beyond just kind of looking at the people, process, the tech, the platform, and the data, I think it's also critically important to be aware that there's these people that are in the middle of all of this. And I think it's very important, I think, to be empathetic to how people are, especially like the right now. I think there's a lot going on right now, and it's a generational right now. And I don't mean to make this all kind of like scary, but I think it's important to recognize that we've got a multi-generational workforce out there, right? You got all sorts of Gen Xers that are a little bit stressed about because they've lived through a lot of things. They lived through Cold War and 9/11 and .com. You've got millennials that have gone through, the war on terror and smartphones and social media and FOMO and COVID-19. You got your Gen Z who I love it, and they've got their interesting slang, but they've gone through COVID-19. They've had there's climate crisis right now. They've got smartphones, and it's a lot. Like psychologically, there's been a lot going on, and I think this AI is this next industrial revolution that's happening to us. And for me, like my only recommendation, again, without sort of beating the dead horse, is just about leading with empathy. A key part that I didn't want to go into too much, but I just want to, I would be remiss if I didn't say something. No matter what we think, or no matter what Microsoft says, no matter what, AI is going to displace some level of jobs. It's going to, right? There's no other reason why it's being pushed so hard, because eventually that's going to happen, right? There's different areas that are being targeted. We've seen, we've seen software engineering, right? I think that's probably one of the best examples where we're seeing probably the greatest gains in the ability for agents to be able to do software engineering at velocity and at scale that you really just can't even sometimes accomplish with humans. And you could debate whether the quality of it's good or bad, but ultimately, like, that is an area that's definitely being disrupted. And maybe it's not that engineers are going to go away, but there might be fewer of them. And obviously, having fewer engineers means you have fewer people that are contributing, that are paying their mortgages, that are taking care of their families and all that. So I think as you're embarking on this AI journey, it is about being empathetic and being transparent and having the right leadership to help communicate that to your organization, because there is going to be some level of disruption, right? I think I always laugh when Microsoft says that Copilot's going to be an assistant, but I also see Microsoft as one of the biggest they're the perpetrators of gigantic layoffs due to AI. So it's really hard for them to say out of one side of their mouth that AI is not going to replace people when we're literally seeing them do that. So again, I don't mean to be like a little bit negative, but I think I'm being realistic that there is going to be that disruption. Part of the challenge of getting people to want to participate is for them to not feel psychologically like they are training their replacement. And I think, and if the end, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. when you figure out where to start doing, where to start, where to begin, it's really about, nailing these pilots, these first initial use cases. And I like to tell the story that back when I was working in industry, I had a CIO, Nancy Davis. She's probably perhaps one of the most interesting people that I got to work with. And I worked at United Technologies, and we don't have to talk about a company that was the IT budget was super tight. It's UTC. We hated spending money. 1.8% of our spend was on IT, which is below the industry average. And one of the things that she would ask anytime we were taking on a new project is, Jared, are you really trying to prove this thing out, or are you stacking the deck? And what she meant by that was, are you going in without bias? Are you going in with, trying to prove it right? Or are you trying to truly experiment to see if it works or it doesn't? And I think a lot of times we go into these pilots trying to prove it's going to be successful versus going in saying, you know what? I don't know if it's going to be successful or not, but we're going to learn from it. And for some organizations, that's a hard thing to change. That's a cultural change. But I ultimately do believe, again, as I've said, that this technology is about experimentation, and it's about learning from that. And I think the more you can help to sort of cultivate that culture, the more successful you're going to be in driving AI transformation in your organization. And when you start to choose your pilots, it's really about those specific, actual, business problems. It's about really trying to reduce that uncertainty and testing some of your assumptions about this. Are we seeing value? Are we able to avoid some risk? And what does it look like as we start to have people adopt this? Is it intuitive? Is it natural? Do people really feel like is this being molded around existing processes, or are people having to try to conform to this new way of working? Is success, are we gaining insights from this and learning from it? And or are we just doing these cool demos to prove this stuff out? And it's really, from my perspective, it's important when you're choosing pilots to not just kick those tires. It's really about what business problems are you solving, what outcomes are you trying to drive. So when you are trying to stack the deck for success, you have to find use cases where you have good data. Pointing and building an HR agent where you have a mess of a document library is not going to work out for you. If people only update stuff every now and then, not going to work out for you. And not only do you have to make sure that the data is in a good spot, you have to have people that want to be able to experiment with this. You want people that are feeling some level of pain, that they want to understand how this technology is going to make their lives a little bit better. What's in it for me to help to participate in this? It's also super important to not have a super technical pilot be your first. Limit the amount of dependencies. Don't try to go ahead and have it connect to all these various systems. You're going to be stuck in architecture review board for weeks. Don't do that. Stick really, really small, learn from it. And those early wins will help you to build confidence, not just yourself, but in the organizations tackle on the more complicated use cases. And a checklist, just kind of like to go through, preparing and trying to figure out, is this the right pilot and can we nail this? Do you have the business problem clearly defined? And do people feel it? And do you understand the data sources and permissions needed to achieve this? And is this pilot scoped small enough that you can complete it in a couple of weeks, not months or years? And then after this pilot, who owns this thing? How does this continue on? And what does work look like after this thing has been successful, right? What does the future state change look like? And also, how are we capturing lessons learned and reusing them as we then go ahead and proceed on to other areas? And so, again, this is meant to be just sort of a little checklist to help you as you're evaluating use cases, and that you're trying to really make sure that you're successful in those pilots. Moving on to my next favorite is iterate. Big proponent of moving fast and breaking stuff. So the ABCs around iterating is always be calibrating. You want to continuously collect feedback from people that are actively involved, whether it be a quick little pulse survey, or you capture someone at the water cooler, or you grab have a quick coffee with them. It's all about making sure that you're trying to reach people because everybody responds to sort of questions differently. There's some people that love those surveys, some people that will never fill out that survey. So figure out how to approach the people that you picked. And one of the great things you can do is a super simple little trick. You can ask people, what is the best way for me to collect information from you? What's your style of providing feedback? Is it in person? Is it in a crowd? Is it a forum? Ask them that. It's important to know that going into it because you want to collect that feedback. And part of why you want to collect feedback, especially when it comes to experimenting with AI, is AI is not going to solve every single problem. I love to say this. Like, there are so many use cases that maybe you go into thinking that an agent is going to be the right one, but if it's a really structured business process, BPM might be the solution for that, and it might be cheaper. It might be quicker to implement. And I started kind of putting this together as a means to help, drive that decision making. What might be something that's a good fit for just typical business process management solutions, and what's better for something with AI. So, like, where a process is very clear, it's very repeatable. Yeah, that's a great opportunity for a business process. When there's some ambiguity, or the steps can be in different order, that might be better for AI. When the rules are really well defined and stable, that might be BPM. When there's some logic or judgment based, AI, right? So kind of stepping through, there's examples where, BPM is the right tool. When it gets more structured and more rigid, AI is really good with some of that ambiguity, some of that judgment, some of that personalization, and even depending on sort of the user interface, right? If you're talking about someone that's going to be in front of a device, right, as an input, BPM might be great. If you're trying to build something that's meant for mobile folks, people that are on the road, that they're moving around, they're leveraging their cell phone. A lot for me personally, I find it's a lot easier to speak than it is to try to type on my smartphone. I can do it more naturally, and it feels more conversational. And it's funny, like, one of the use cases that I like to leverage AI for is brainstorming, and I like to really do it on my phone, my earbuds, kind of walking around the house, maybe kind of petting the dogs, feeding the dogs, walking the dogs. That for me is very natural, and I feel like I get the most value out of that. So again, this is not meant to be a completely exhaustive list of every potential consideration, but I'm hoping this is helpful just for a starting point. And always, part of you measuring or collecting, or is to ensure that you are calibrating is and iterating is to ensure that you've got the right tool to solve the problem as we learn more about it, right? You learn so much by giving a business person some technology and collecting that feedback, and part of iterating might be changing direction. It might be getting better data. It might be tweaking the service. It might be trying a different model. And that's why it's super important to have that regular dialogue back with your business owners. So beyond iterating, we're about tracking impact, measuring what matters. And it's important to go into any of these experiments, realize that if you can't measure it, you can't scale it. And what I mean by that is, if you give out 10 Copilot, I always like to pick on Copilot. You have 10 Copilot license. If you can't measure the impact that those licenses are having on people, your CFO is going to give you a hard time when there's that push to go buy more. Right? It's really challenging to convince them that, and being able to track the impact that that's having, it helps build that confidence with your leadership to either make additional investments in that tech or to maybe pivot. And what you can measure from an impact perspective also helps you gives you a backlog of where there might be opportunities to further improve. Meaning, for example, if you built an agent that's meant for claims processing and you're finding that, we're able to save 30 to 45 seconds per claim. If you're able to measure that, a question you could ask yourself is it possible to shave another 15 seconds off that? And what might that take? Right? So it's really important to go into these situations thinking through how do you track that impact, because it's going to help inform either further iteration, further development, customization, or is also would help to give the CFO or other executive stakeholders the right information to help decide, do we scale this even further than what we've invested so far? And when it's like, what do you measure? First up, it's all around outcomes, right? Is this something that's going to drive new revenue? Or is it going to help either save cost or avoid cost? Or in some ways, is this going to help to reduce risk in some ways? When it comes to productivity, is it something that's going to help you save, again, it said 15, 30 seconds? Does it save a couple hours? Does it mean you can cycle through something faster? Does, from a productivity perspective, does this help you avoid any rework because it's able to help provide multiple perspectives? When it comes to measuring of adoption, are people actually using this? So not only is it driving those sort of quantifiable savings, but are you actually seeing people use this, right? That's another measurement. How many people are actively using this at any given time? And then from a quality perspective, what does it look like? Are there any errors? Is it reducing errors and turnbacks? Are people happy with it? Either the downstream consumers of whatever service that you're building, and are the people that are using this technology happier in their roles? And quality is one that I like to harp on because for me personally, I feel like the benefits of AI are maybe not so much the productivity, the time savings. I don't think I work any less with AI. I think I probably work more. But the thing that I've noticed is overall the quality of my work products has gotten better to some degree. I'm able to certainly fix a lot of my grammar mistakes, but I'm also able to get very diverse analysis on what I produce, right? A classic example is I'm able to identify where are areas of ambiguity in some of the work that I produce, emails I produce, Word documents I produce, and ensuring that it's very understandable for different personas. Now, Microsoft gives you some ways of thinking through impact either from Copilot Studio, like savings per run. So again, how many times was this agent invoked, and have some sort of number to quantify that. They also put savings per tool, which I think is funny, but what they call tool is if an agent is able to reach out to CRM like Salesforce, to Dynamics, that's leveraging a tool that's going to go perform that connection and that transaction. So you can put a dollar amount to that, and it's a little bit of fuzzy math, right? Like one of those, like if you're saving $1 million with an agent, those are not exactly always hard costs, but it's kind of giving you some way to quantify that impact. There might be some metrics or some dashboards that you can build which help to roll up like multiple applications. You can see who has licenses, who are active users, where do those people work. Another thing that I've shared with folks too, and this is kind of geared a little bit more towards Copilot, that $30 per user per month license, but I think at the end of the day when you're measuring, it is going to be a combination of quantitative and qualitative. And so I'm someone that's built business cases for a good 20 plus years of my career. And I don't think this AI technology is any different than anything else I've ever done when it comes to coming up with a business case. You go ahead and list out the FTEs, the full-time equivalent rates. You start to come up with some sort of time savings impact. And you estimate really conservatively is what I do. I mean, I'm a big fan of sandbagging and over delivering. So if you take the average, like I'll pick on the project manager, right? $60 an hour FTE rate, they save 1 hour a week. From a productivity perspective, that's $240 a month, right? A little bit of soft savings, but to some degree, it helps us to at least paint the picture that this, like when used correctly, this technology could have a quantifiable impact on our bottom line. It's while that hour per week savings is a fact, I think the reality is for you to truly realize that impact. It's really about how do you sort of reallocate that hour to something more of value, and that's another more like lengthy conversation. But at least this is giving you a starting point for quantitative. And then on the qualitative side, I think it's important to be upfront that this is more of a subjective measurement. This is going to, for the most part, require some sort of a self attestation that this is improving the quality of the work that I do. I am happier in my role overall as an employee. I'm happier at the organization. So Again, whether you're doing like a internal like net promoter score or sort of employee survey, like collecting like both side of this is helpful because at the end of the day, a business case is a story that you tell to help drive or give your senior leadership um, the right data to make a further decision, whether to continue making additional investments or not to. So again, this is something that I've shared with a bunch of folks at this point as a means to get started, to start thinking about this. Now, brings me to like the last one, the embed governance. It's really about updating operating model. What I mean by that is operating model, not operating system. Operating model, in case you're not familiar with that term, it's really sort of your processes and how you all work together as a collective team within your organization. And the key is really about with embedding governance is making things a habit and not a one-off. Meaning that first AI project that you start is going to be just that. It's going to be a project. It's going to be new to everyone. People are going to be still trying to be like figuring out what role do I play in this. I'm now responsible for assessing risk or looking at different NIST frameworks, or you're picking this model. Gosh, is that a Chinese model that I need to worry about because we're a government contractor? Do we have the right operational guardrails in place? Do we have processes in place? If we see, AI doing bad things, like how do we pull the plug? Like there's a lot of that project work, but the shift that you're going to need to have happen is embedding this into your operating model so that, getting beyond just the pilots. So the pilots tend to be a little bit easier to some degree because depending on where it's being generated from, you might have that executive buy-in that's sort of doing that top down, like you security people are really tough. You need to work together with this team to make this happen. So you gotta get that first push. But and pilots relatively tend to be a little bit safer than a true like enterprise rollout. But I found that operationalizing this tends to be kind of difficult. And it's really not so much a technology problem. It's more about it's a people process type of problem. It's helping to take someone from like your role today is this, your role today is tomorrow. Here's the areas that you need to evaluate for. And this is and governance is really around taking these pilots and these experiments and turning it into sustainable operations in your environment and helping people to step through and ask about, do we have to worry about, data leakage? Do we know what things might impact or bias, the AI? Are there any compliance risks to think through? Do we have a way of vetting out use cases? And can we kind of keep these guardrails in place so that people are ultimately doing the right thing and able to experiment in a way where we're able to learn from it without finding yourselves on the cover of the Wall Street Journal? And so some governance that you would want to put into place is, for example, life cycle. So this stuff, especially when we're moving fast and breaking things, what's the life cycle behind that agent experiment or that really killer prompt that you built or that amazing workflow? When does that get retired? Where's it when to get Mary Kondo where if it's no longer sparking joy, do you toss it away? How do you actually request access for agents, right? This is, it's a little bit different than putting in that help desk ticket to get access to that file share. If we're going to go grant an agent access to a document library, what does that look like? Who has to sign off on that? What do we worry about for that data that's in that library? As we're monitoring that agent working, who's responsible for even looking at that? Who's responsible for ensuring that everything's working as expected, that the responses coming back are grounded on the data that you've defined and not based on the model's training data? Who's looking for if someone were to embed malicious instructions into a document that doesn't cause AI to do something that it shouldn't do? And who's going to help train and support people to follow these new processes? While there's certainly a heavy emphasis on technology, a lot of this work is user experience. It's also about, ensuring that data is kept up to date and that people that maybe sort of treated SharePoint and Teams as a junk drawer now have to think through life cycle on that data. And how do you get people to truly transform and adopt this into their flow work? So this is part of what you need to solve for with governance to be able to truly scale AI and transform with it. So again, that was my talk. I certainly forgot, didn't throw out ask too many questions, but if I was to give you just a couple of key takeaways, and I think maybe we'll use like the end to sort of solicit any thoughts, feedback. AI readiness is really it's a new thing. It's not this checklist. It's really about modifying processes and thinking through. I mean, I'll be honest. The amount of, especially when it comes to unstructured data, that need to create structure and lifecycle has never been greater. And when you're picking your use cases, you really need to start focusing on solving for true pain, true business outcomes, business problems. It's about, transitioning from, at some point, from these experiments into operating with AI. And I'm hopeful that at least maybe no matter where you are in your experimentation or your AI transformation, I really hope that this framework is helpful for you to either validate that you're doing some of these things, today, that you're seeing this and it's helpful, or if you're still early on, I'm hopeful that, I'm hoping this is helpful for you to sort of get a little bit more organized and make sure that you're focusing, on the right things that are going to drive, the most value from this technology. So this has been a very different talk than I normally give. I definitely do way more sort of, I don't know, experiments or demoing of certain different technologies, but this is something I'm very passionate about. I feel like there's a lot of potential, but I'm also unfortunately a Slavic East Coast pessimist. So I always like to sprinkle in just a little bit of a pessimism anytime I encounter any of this stuff. So definitely appreciate the platform and the opportunity. You guys are honestly one of the best user groups. I love the fact that I'm able to try out new material and see if it sticks or not. And I do really apologize. I would have loved to have been able to enjoy some of that yummy pizza from what I've heard in person, gotten to see a couple of my old friends there. But definitely, like, that's all I've got from a content perspective. Open to any conversation, any thoughts, feedback, any areas that either validation or challenging. Like, I'm open for whatever.
I'll dive in. It's Pat Keating. Jared, great to see you.
Oh, Pat, how are you, man? My God, I wish I was there with you. Grab a beer with you.
Yeah, but soon, I'm sure. And I don't know about the dogs, but we were all wide awake and highly engaged. So great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Question about, you talked a lot about data and governance, sensitivity labels, all that kind of stuff. I think I was at an event yesterday, and one client that was in the room said they had 250 different sensitivity labels of their content, right? This is not the biggest company in the world. And there was another that said that they've been working on their Purview project for like 2 years. So given the pressure that we're all feeling around this and the, talk about slop that's out there, are you seeing anything that's encouraging in terms of doing this in a more speedy fashion, given the kinds of environments a lot of folks are in, so that we can be efficient and do a good job of labeling and governing well?
Wow, all right, Pat. I don't know. I mean, that's a little bit of layup right there. All right, I have a quick question.
Good.
I don't know, like, time check. Do you guys have like 10 minutes or so? Because I actually have like another talk that's really targeted at that exact problem. Because I want to, if people would be people interested in that? Because I'm going to talk through the Microsoft native capabilities and considerations around it. And Pat, what you talked about from a data classification perspective, I have some very strong opinions about that. So, like, is there nodding in the head? Like, that might be something.
No, there's some nodding. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna bring that up then real quick. I'm kind of laughing, Pat, just the fact that I pretty much spend my day talking about this exact topic. Like, pretty much, like,
I would think so. Yeah.
like, this is like, what do I do? This is what I do. So when it comes to Copilot readiness and you're looking at the Microsoft native capabilities to prepare for Copilot or for agents, it's reporting. So understanding where you might have risk across your tenant, where you might have oversharing, overexposure of sensitive data. Step two is around based on what you find, how do you start to remediate those findings at scale? And when I especially say at scale, because you can't realistically throw more bodies at this problem and get out in front of it, right? I think what this the stat is like is 80%, 90% of the world's data has been created in the past 2 years. Like we do not have enough people to throw at this problem because it is so easy to create new content. And by the way, AI is helping to build this content too. So remediation is that next big bucket. And third is around lifecycle management, ensuring that not only do you have you performed remediation, but ensuring that those workspaces that this content sits in are governed, managed, and you're reducing sprawl and risk and cost, right? If you think about like looking at the tooling, these are the things that you want to solve for. So when I start to step through what Microsoft brings to the table for capabilities, I'm going to first hit you with reporting gaps. So my background, again, I worked at aerospace and defense. For me, data classification thing I've done since 2012, 2013. It was super important for us. So it's important for you to understand that when you're leveraging Purview, and it will find sensitive content in your tenant, but you're going to be dealing with false positives, right? Because sensitive information types are regular expressions, and when you do the content inspection of a document, it's trying to find the matching regular expression and see if it sits in that document, right? And so while Purview will find sensitive content, the reports are a little bit ambiguous. And don't forget too, the reports are just a flat directory. Here's all the workspaces with some like limited metadata around it, but there's no real context around what that is. You don't even know if that's overshared or not. You don't even know if there's a problem. You know there's sensitive files, but you don't know if that's a good or bad thing. When it comes to solving that problem, that oversharing, you've got two types of reports. There's the Purview Data Risk Assessment reports. That's part of the E5 license. Or there's SharePoint Advanced Management, which comes with the Data Access Governance reports, which comes with at least one Copilot license. The challenge with both of those reports is they're bound by the unified audit log data. And what that means is if the sharing happened during a 30-day reporting window, it's there. But if it's outside of that window, if we run the report in March and I shared a file with everyone except external users back in September, that does not show up in some of these reports. So you don't get true visibility end to end or where there's overexposure. And when you talk about searching or reporting on those large entre groups, maybe all employees, all managers, all contractors, all US employees, whatever, all teachers, all students, those do not show up. The reports are all out of the box and not customizable. So you're basically getting like the everyone except external users groups or the anyone links. That's typically what you get from a lot of these reports. And I think I said it before, but there's that limited business context in native reporting. You do not see the intersection of, these sites have sensitive data. Like, is this an HR site? Is it external collaboration? Is it an application? Is it just what you have no idea, right? You have to try to piece that all together. And I know you'll be like, well, Jared, I don't know. Is that true? Like, is that really a thing? Yeah, it is. Look, so, and this might be hard to see on those screens, but on the on the left-hand side, right, I highlighted the 28 days. On the left-hand side, those are the SharePoint Advanced Management reports. And on the Data Risk Assessment report as part of the DSPM module for Purview, it's going to show you the top 100 SharePoint sites and it's sharing activities over the past 30 days. So if you've got more than 100 sites, and if that reporting has been it's happened beyond 30 days, you don't get a true end-to-end visibility in terms of oversharing. So right out the start, you don't have true picture of oversharing in your tenant. Then I'm going to pivot to, well, all right, let's pretend we find some of the problems. How do we actually fix any of these things? So the levers you can pull from remediation are permissions management, right? Going ahead and cleaning up permissions, making sure that they're right-sized. Or maybe take on a data classification project and apply sensitivity labels. Or maybe you're going to do restricted SharePoint search so you can make a little bit of progress with your rollout and not have it expose too much content to Copilot. Or maybe you do restricted content access where you define an intro group. And if someone tries to break permissions inheritance on that document, they still can't get access. Or maybe you can do lifecycle management. And for each one of these, I'm going to step you through just some considerations when it comes to scaling this at a real organization. So the first is permissions management, right? So you're really talking about right sizing sites and team permissions to try to limit overexposure. The reality behind this is you're talking about throwing people at a problem. Highly manual review process to track it. Don't forget too, people keep creating files and they keep sharing files. So you're playing this crazy game of whack-a-mole, trying to go ahead and remediate while the business keeps on working. So the reality is this might sound good, but unless you're a smaller organization with tight controls, this ain't happening. This is not going to scale for most of your use cases. The second, and this is getting to the question you had, Pat, is around data classification with sensitivity labels. So Microsoft says, yes, you need to go ahead and classify all of your content. I'm going to tell you, and you already said it, this is a huge user adoption change management problem. And by the way, the label doesn't do diddly unless there's an encryption policy associated with that label. The label is a visual indicator around the classification of the file. It's not until you create a protection policy does that force permissions on that document, meaning you define an intro group that would have access, and if someone is not a member of that intro group, they would not be able to open up that file. That's technically how that works. And for me, I came from consulting. These projects are 18 plus months, and that's not even to get full label saturation, ignoring the fact that there are some files you can't even apply a label to, right? So to further just poke the bear, typically when I work with customers and they're going down a data classification journey, they're not doing hundreds of labels, but that's nuts. They start out with 3, right? And to keep it kind of simple, you might have your confidential label. This is locked down to a small subset of your data. If you're Coca-Cola, this is the recipe for Coca-Cola, right? Or if this is, maybe you're doing some M&A activity, or maybe it's executive compensation plan. Very, very, very small subset of your data that's highly confidential, that's really more of a need to know basis. And then you've got your internal only content, stuff that's not quite as sensitive as that, but also you don't want to have that leak out to a reporter because no one wants to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Not great, right? That's not a great way to start out your Monday, Tuesday. So that kind of makes sense. So confidential, locked down to a subset of group, internal only, locked down to everyone except external users. That all kind of makes sense. And then you got your third category, which is public. This is okay to share. Press releases, social media posts, the work that you're doing out in the community, right? Relatively safe. The cafeteria menu, that's relatively safe, right? And so as you can feel, okay, I've got confidential, locked down to some people, internal only, yep, locked down to just our org. But this is not really helping me solve for oversharing, is it? No, this is more about your typical sort of DLP. You're trying to avoid data exfiltration, data leaving your tenant. So you go, all right, well, let's come up with some more labels, right? We're going to address this overshare. We're going to nip this oversharing thing right in the bud. So you come up with a couple of these new labels, right? You got your HR only label. That's just for your employee records and compensation and performance data. Then you got your contract, your legal only data, right? It's your contracts, your privileged communications, any of the legally things that they do, suing people and all that. And then you got your financial data, financial statements, forecasts, budgets, and all that. So you start locking the stuff down to prevent oversharing, but then you're like, oh shoot. But I need HR to be able to collaborate with legal and just those 2 groups. So all right, well, easy enough. Let's go ahead and spin up another label, right? An HR and legal label. And then I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. HR has to collaborate with finance. So I need HR and finance label. And then wait a second. Legal and finance need to go ahead and work together. And then we completely forgot about operations. Let's bring them in. Operations and legal. They've got operations and HR. That does not scale, right? The average human can pick between 3 to 5 labels. That's it. You do more than 5 labels, you're crazy. It ain't going to work. I don't care if you can do, you can do sub-labels and you can limit who sees which. Okay, who's managing all this? And think through you as the user, right? I have to create this file. You're first making me try to put this crazy label on it. And now I have to try to figure out who's going to ever have to access this file. What did I tell you before? What have I said before? When people do sharing, they don't even pick the people they want to share with. They just share with everybody except external users and the tenant for these files. They're not picking the right label. This does not solve for oversharing. I don't care what anybody says. This is not the right approach. This is good for ensuring data doesn't leak out of your environment, but this isn't solving for oversharing. This is complex. You're spending 2 years on this, right? And I'll pick on restricted SharePoint search. This ain't solving for it either. This is just putting a band-aid on a problem. You're limiting to 100 sites that can be accessed. You're going to break enterprise search with this. It's a temporary measure, right? It's only meant to give you a little bit of a breathing room. And restricted content access. So this is a little bit better, right? This is what this will do for you is you say for these really highly confidential sites or risky sites, you have that managed with an Entra group. So if a business user tries to break permissions on the file, it doesn't matter. The restricted content access overrides it. For you to be aware, you got to be careful that you might have to build processes for people to be able to add and remove individuals to that Entra group. Either you build a customization, some automation with that, or you have a help desk queue set up, but that will require some new business process to ensure that you can move forward with that. And then your last, and I'll shut up for a little bit, is lifecycle management. Part of the goal could be to try to get your users to participate in the permissions management, in the renewal, purge out older content, either archive it like y'all were talking about earlier, or ideally delete it. But be aware from a SharePoint Advanced Management perspective, some of these lifecycle management jobs are separate. So a sharing links review and a permissions attestation are separate, and I believe that there's a limit to how many you can run at a time. Like it's like 100. For smaller tenants, not that big of a deal. But if you've got a bigger tenant, that could be more of a challenge. So I think the reality is like this is what's tough about the native tooling is none of these really are geared towards helping you to get Copilot ready and to address oversharing. Like I do not believe data classification is the path forward. I think it's an important thing to have. I think having classifying content is important, but it's not going to address overshare. And I think that that's a really hard thing to do. I think that's honestly, I mean, if you ask like me what I do when I'm not talking and sort of at user groups is, I mean, there's third parties like us, like and others that have solutions that fill some of these gaps for Copilot readiness, and that's really, unfortunately, what's needed. Otherwise, you're either building your own or you're writing scripts to start to address some of this stuff.
That's great.
That was probably the longest answer. That was a 12-minute answer.
Great answer. That's great. Thanks, Chad.
So.
You didn't format a state of a question though, so you don't get the money.
No money? Oh, come on.
So I got one for you.
Sure.
I don't drink the Kool-Aid, so I guess I'm on the pessimist side of things as well when it comes to certain things. One of the things you talked about is the gold rush, and I am definitely in alignment with the fact that, in all honesty, people are thinking that AI is going to be able to do something, but I equate it to having a 2-year-old try to fly the space shuttle.
Yeah.
From your experiences with AI and things like that, have you come across situations where people are bending the rules of ROI to try to justify it? Because I worked with early information science for quite a while, and one of the things that was drilled in my head was that ROI is either reduction of workforce or increasing the profit margin. This does neither. And one of the things you did with that table was, yes, and I would bring that to my chief finance officer for early, and she's like, yeah, that has nothing to do with ROI.
100%. Actually, this is fun. I'm gonna just tangent the heck out of things. I got one more. I got one more slide that actually speaks exactly to that, because I think it's important because there's different types of AI, right? I think that's like an important thing to think about. There's different types of AI, and where is my? There it is. Okay. So let me share you this, and I can't take credit for this one. This is Gartner, and I usually like to roll my eyes when I hear about Gartner times. I hear that. Oh, this is being recorded. Never mind.
Looking at it.
But this was something I attended that I thought was actually a very interesting way of framing different business case patterns for generative AI. And so to your point, Dave, right? So you're talking about things like, Copilot, where, it's more of a defend, where your competitors are making investments in this technology, and the returns are very incremental. You're getting some marginal gains, marginal productivity gains, but it's really not having that significant of an impact where you can, to your point, really talk about cutting heads. There's a lot of the AI right now that's in that defend sort of category, whereas extend is something that where you can differentiate. So, the example here is around, Gen AI in a customer service use case to recommend, an upsell, something that wasn't maybe factored in or thought about. Another way of thinking about that would be, again, going to sort of like the contact center path, right? You know that, the way the contact centers are run, every minute counts for money, right? You want to try to get that call time down as short as possible, because that means that you need fewer people to be able to address the volume of calls coming into the contact center. So the average call time, maybe it's 7 minutes. If you introduced AI into the mix, you bring it down to 2 minutes. Like, that's very measurable, right? So either you're extending an existing process, or you're optimizing that existing process. And then the third bucket that Gartner's called out is the upend. And it's really about investing in AI to be able to do things you couldn't do today. And the examples here are around, drug discovery, pharmaceutical, research and development. That's more of like your classic, regardless of it being pharmaceutical, but it's typically like R&D. It's helping us to break into a new revenue stream that we didn't have before. And when you flip these around, it really becomes the defend is the return on the employee. And if I was to equate like what we've seen today, that's very similar to defend, it's like, how do you justify building an intranet in SharePoint? Or how do you justify having Wi-Fi on your campus? Or the ability to have remote access, or to be able to have access to Office M365 on your phone, right? At some level, you're investing in that employee experience to be able to attract and retain the best talent, right? So that defend is really like kind of keeping up with the Joneses and kind of keeping that moat around your castle. Whereas in the extend category, you are going to see more of that typical true ROI, right? I'm able to reduce a business process. I'm able to generate new revenue that we couldn't capitalize on before. And that upend is really about disrupting whatever industry you're in to return on the future, right? It's the typical R&D model where you invest money today to make money tomorrow. So I agree with you. There's a lot of AI right now that's far on the left that's very hard to justify for the bean counters, right? Because I don't know, my opinion, you cannot cut heads with Copilot. This is garbage for cutting heads. Like, that is not going to work. Like, these are micro gains. This is not a full replacement. I still believe wholeheartedly that the best return you get on something like Copilot right now is on improvement of quality. And if you're not investing in it, you are going to potentially lose talent to people that are going to work at a company that invests in that type of technology. That's my own personal opinion. So I don't know if that was a question or answer question, or it's just more of a tangent.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm looking for, because a lot of times, all right, let me take my son, for example. He's turning 20 this year, and he and his friends who are are looking at technology are calling AI the next Bitcoin as a fad. That's a whole. This is a whole new generation. I see it as there will be value add come hell or high water. These companies are spending billions of dollars. They're going to force it one way or the other, to the point where sometimes Microsoft comes across as a drug, pusher called Copilot. It's like, hey kid, you want some candy? The long, the long and the short of it is, yes, it's going to work, but I think they're putting too much weight on something that's made out of balsa wood. It's as a prototype versus something that has to be more fleshed out and solidified to be a much higher value add.
The only thing that I'm usually the pessimist. I'm gonna play the role of optimist a little bit, which is uncomfortable for me because I don't always like doing that. The only thing that the only optimism I'll throw at you, which I think is interesting, is what Anthropic was able to do with Claude Work. So if you're unfamiliar with, like, you might have heard of Claude Code, the ability to have AI develop software, right? Super cool functionality. They used that to build Claude Work. And what Claude Work does, it's actually something that runs locally on your machine. It's able to orchestrate and access files. And don't get me wrong, right now there's elements of it that are like a 2-year-old, like where it will delete stuff, break stuff for sure. But the fact that they were able to vibe code that in like 2 weeks is what we saw early in February, where there was that giant I can only say it, the huge drop in the stock market on all the SaaS-based stocks, right? Because basically, like, holy crap, like AI is going to vibe code all these various SaaS platforms. Now, I'm going to put my East Coast pessimist hat. It built a lot of AI slop, but it is pretty impressive how quickly it did that. So while I'm going to reiterate, I don't think we're there yet. I agree with you wholeheartedly that the hyperscalers are going to get their billions of dollars of return on their investment. Come hell or high water, they're going to do it. And so where's my point on that? They're going to get their return on it. I don't think it's going to be a fad. I don't think it's going to be Bitcoin. I think it might evolve into something different than what we see today. But I do think ultimately, it's going to, in some ways, win. And it's not just going to go away. I can't believe your kid's 20. That makes me feel really old.
Crazy, isn't it?
It's really crazy. Like, I remember he was a little peanut. So, okay, wow. That just sort of shook me. So.
Can I throw out one of the benefits of AI for an individual, since you've got that individual bucket?
Sure.
I have a partner. She's not 100% technical savvy, but I showed her how to use Copilot for a few things. And the satisfaction she got out of, oh, I can do this. Oh, it's written a poem for me, or it's helped me analyze a spreadsheet or build a PowerPoint. That satisfaction, that wonderful grin, or that twinkle in your eye, that was a huge win. I mean, I don't know how good it is, but that I've started to see more and more. And I know you kind of covered a little bit about the customer satisfaction, but I would have thought that was a big part of this. You can't really measure it. It's the twinkle in the eye. I don't know, how can you measure that? But it's that wonderful satisfaction that their job well done, quickly done, efficiently done, and I got good quality output. That is amazing to people.
But the thing is, you said the miracle word. She's not technologically savvy. That's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Because what you're going to end up finding, and I'm finding even at Staples, is the fact that the people who are not technologically savvy, the ones who are writers, are the ones who get the best results because they know how to ask questions appropriately. The who are technology, we're special. We're
special.
But the long and the short of it is the ones. I forgot which study it was. I apologize. I'll see if I can find it again. The ones that were getting the best results from AI were actually writers. So people who write books, articles, blogs, insert X here, whatever they do as a living, they were the ones who were able to get the most out of it because they know how to speak. They know how to ask questions. IT does a lot of context. If I tell you about Exchange, you know it's a server. We wouldn't put that into a prompt because we're thinking in context. We're thinking, a different lingo, different conversation pieces. AI, you need to literally spell it out, and that's where the writers come into play.
Well, I mean, we're back to you. To get satisfaction out of this, you have to ask the right question. Ask a silly question, you get a silly answer. So back to prompt engineering. So I've been instilling in her. Honestly, it was like, well, ask it this way, ask it that way. And then suddenly she's learning how to prompt. So yeah, that's the learning phase. You learn how to prompt, suddenly you get a good answer back, and wow, this is really, and she's now telling all her friends, oh, this is good. But
Yeah.
you start to go through that prompt learning curve to help them make it useful.
You gotta treat it like an intern, right? If you have an intern and you tell them like, go get me coffee, who knows what you're gonna get back?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But if you coach them exactly on your preferences, what you're expecting, the timelines, you kind of explain the whole scenario, you'll probably get a pretty good response back. You probably get what you're looking for. Not every time, but most of the time. And that's a bit how we look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, one trick that I've done to try to improve my prompting skills is in my prompt, I'll ask it, what other information do you need that would be helpful to produce a better response? And then it will tell me additional parameters that would make it better. So when I feed that back to that second prompt, the output is significantly better than my one shot just trying to put it all together in the first prompt. So I personally found that to be better, which is why also I prefer, where possible, to do speech. Like I would rather talk to it. I don't get as fatigued versus lots of typing. So it's like another couple. But if you ask it, hey, what do I need to tell you? It'll fill in the gaps. It gives you like a checklist of what to provide it. Much better output for that. But I agree with it too. I've had some wicked cool satisfaction, like for personal. I was like, hey, I want to go to Europe this year. I can fly out of Logan, Newark, JFK. I want to go to somewhere in Europe. What's my best route? The Star Alliance, and it figured it out. Had me in 5 minutes, the best one, and I checked. It was the cheapest flight. I was like, that's pretty darn solid. Like that'd be hard for me to do myself. So cool.
Satisfaction index. That's really that's what I'm suggesting that you add that somewhere in your decks.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's like some really interesting feedback. I like that. Satisfaction. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot.
How you measure, I don't know, but yeah. How satisfied are you with this product? Rate 1 to 10. Oh, here we go again.
But that's important to me. But you brought up the why behind that, right? I mean, you nailed on the head like how this stuff actually works. This isn't because this is transformation. The fact that to spark that joy, for your wife to have that positive experience, for her then to be able to share that with others is how you actually drive transformation, right? It's not about a product where you're learning a few new steps. It's about incorporating new habits into your flow of work. And how do you do that? You observe what others do and you repeat what they do, or mimic what they do. I like that a lot. Satisfaction. I like that a lot. I'm adding that to
Have
that.
that for free. All right.
I appreciate that.
So do we have a few more closeout slides? But before we do, does anyone have any more questions for Jared while we have him?
Any online?
I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay, well, let's give Jared a round of applause. That's great. Thank you, Jared. All right, so we'll keep the closing slides fairly brief. We have our next session coming up next month. We typically meet on the third Thursday of every month. The next session will be on April 16th. It'll be right here. James is going to talk to us about really getting your business process automation figured out before you start to go out and build it. And this is as relevant as ever, as we're all in Copilot Studio trying to build new agents. And sometimes we start to click and drag stuff before we truly understand what we're trying to solve and how it works. We do have a call for speakers open May onwards. We have some tentative potentials in the pipeline, but if you'd like to come and share your knowledge, your use cases of what's working well in your organizations, where your challenges are, please come talk to one of us. We'd love to have it. This is a community user group after all, and part of the community presenting is what makes everyone interested in learning from each other. So we talked about that. In terms of the other upcoming community events, the next big one is the Microsoft 365 Community Conference that's going to be in Orlando the week of April 21st. For those that are going or have not signed up yet, we do have a promo code available to save $150 on the registration. Collab Days New England is going to take place at the Microsoft Technology Center over in Burlington, Mass. It's a free event, and they currently have a call for speakers open. Last year, they actually sold out all of their free tickets. So if you are interested in going, definitely keep an eye on that. And as soon as registration opens, sign up. It used to be called SharePoint Saturday, then moved to Collab Days. Now it takes place on a Friday, which I think makes it a little bit easier to ask for the day off of work for a full day of training. A lot of the same speakers at that event are going to be the ones speaking at the Microsoft conference in Orlando next week or next month. Then there's the Power Platform conference coming up in Vegas a little bit later this year. And then, of course, Microsoft Ignite, the big conference happening this November back in San Francisco. There's a variety of other community platforms that are available online for these types of sessions and more. pnp.github.io will give you a full listing of them. We do have other user groups in the area, including Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Azure-related user groups. So if there's more interest in learning, there's a lot more opportunity in the area. So we'll take a second here to pause and ask, is anyone running into any problems that you'd like community help and feedback on solving? Or conversely, if you've solved something that's really bizarre and strange and want to share it, we'll pause here for a minute or two.
I have one question. I have a nonprofit organization, 501c3. They were getting free licenses. Then the price went up a little bit, and now they got another notice saying they're being cut. Any idea what to do about this?
So they're still offering Business Basic as a license. They're taking away the free E1 grants.
Yeah.
So you still get most of your functionality with Business Basic. And if you choose to buy licenses, the nonprofit pricing is heavily discounted as well.
Okay, so it's still discounted.
Yes.
How big is the organization?
2 people.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's, I just hate to
Oh, I understand.
tell them when they're a nonprofit and they're always scrounging for
Of
funds.
course. Sure.
Yeah, so it won't
Business
destroy
Basic.
them.
Yeah, no, but
It's a
Business
matter of
Basic will do it,
principle.
yeah.
Anyone else have any other problems? Everyone's environments are working great.
Oh, sure.
Bunch of unicorns in here. All right, sounds good. And we'll keep moving. We also want to thank all of our past sponsors as well. AvePoint, which is a company Jared is with now, as well as a number of other companies in this area that have sponsored this user group over a decade plus of meeting on a monthly basis. We did take some logos off of that slide recently, just because a lot of the sponsors were no longer companies. They either were sold or they shut down and so forth.